10 reasons why Madalyn O'Hair must be stopped and 10 ways to stop her.
It is a dehumanizing, sadistic religion that this Christianity is. It turns me cold.
This is the woman who had prayer taken out of our schools. This is the woman who achieved one of the greatest victories against the kingdom of God in the history of our country, and she did it in the name of atheism.
What is the cross? The cross is really just a limp penis with a scrotum on both sides.
Atheism is not American. Prayer is American. The Bible is American. The church is American. Loving God is American. All of this is America, just as much as hot dogs and hamburgers and apple pie.
Of course, the Bible is a bestial book, and it is full of rape and slaughter and incest.
She is a demon-directed damsel, if there ever was one.
The story of Madalyn O'Hair, her scandalous life and sudden disappearance, still haunts the people who choose to be godless in America.
There is absolutely no doubt that atheism will win hands down.
We are the atheists, free from mind control. We have no gods, devils or a soul. Stop all your raving and your rhetoric. Your religions make us sick. Logic and science, good for you and me. Not a foolish Bible or a deity. Let's live together and always be bold. We are the atheists, free from mind control. Free from mind control.
I'm Reggie Nadelson. I'm a writer. For years I've been obsessed with the story of Madalyn O'Hair, who she was and how she disappeared. I'm also fascinated by the way she stood up to and mirrored a zealously religious America. She was born in 1919 in Pennsylvania, the working-class child of hard times. The Depression politicized her. She joined the Army during World War II, saw the world, and understood its possibilities. But by 1945, she was pregnant and unmarried. Intensely intelligent and rebellious, in the early 50s, she found herself in Baltimore, fighting for a place in an oppressively conventional age. Her story is a classic American tale, part black comedy, part epic adventure. Madalyn O'Hair adored her role as God's noisy challenger and America's #1 atheist.
An atheist is a person who questions every kind of authority. And this is the thing that is important, because if we can, without blinking an eye, question the ultimate authority, God, who must be obeyed, then we can question the authority of the state, we can question the authority of a university structure, we can question the authority of our employer, we can question anything.
O'Hair's battle with God and America began here in Baltimore. By 1960, well-educated but rebellious and outspoken, she was looking for a cause, but she knew she was an outsider.
She loses jobs constantly. She has a very strained relation with her parents, with whom she lives. Things begin to fall apart for her. And she begins to write in her diary very honestly about her failings. Having 2 children out of wedlock, unable to keep a job. She says, I've just made some bad choices and made some bad decisions, and I'm paying the price for it.
I'm trapped and I know it, she wrote. She contemplated suicide and then tried to defect to the Soviet Union.
It has been called a religion. It has been called an international criminal conspiracy. Certainly it is more than a social theory, more than a method of political organization or an economic system. It is a directed way of life. It is communism.
I have two pictures here, and you must make your choice.
At the height of the Cold War, Soviet communism was the ultimate nightmare. It threatened nuclear Armageddon and America's God.
And many people seem to be making decisions throughout the earth to follow one or the other.
God was so inextricably linked to the American identity that it really sets up this polarization of a nation that believes in God. In 1956, In God We Trust becomes the national motto, and everybody associated with communism is godless. It's the evil empire writ early, and it's atheistic, and you cannot be one without being the other.
O'Hair's son, Bill Murray, remembers how the penalties of Madalyn's politics wrecked his childhood.
I was actually raised in an atheist home. My Sunday school was Marxist-Leninism, and I saw how that whole philosophy destroyed a family unit, because it did indeed destroy my family unit. My family were communists because my mother couldn't hold down a job. I mean, every 30 days she'd get a job, tell them what to do, and get fired, you know.
Madalyn dragged her sons off to Paris and tried to defect at the Soviet embassy. The Soviets didn't want an American with 2 kids. She went back to Baltimore, more lost than ever. It was autumn 1960, and O'Hair's defining moment was about to arrive.
Our Father, who art in heaven.
She heard students reciting prayers at the school where her son Bill had just started. O'Hair began a furious campaign insisting that prayer in school was unconstitutional, that it breached the separation of church and state. Bill became the center of a public storm.
I think I am an atheist, and I wish to be an atheist, and I don't feel that it would be appropriate for me to stand up and say the Lord's Prayer.
Madalyn had found her cause. She relished the battle with traditional religion, and she ridiculed believers she called Christers. For 3 long years, she pursued her secular journey against school prayer, all the way to the Supreme Court. At last, in 1963, she won a landmark ruling.
There will be no more religious ceremonies in the public schools.
It was a stunning victory. One of the Supreme Court's most startling judgments. It reshaped the religious landscape of America. It shocked millions who still lived by the traditional faith of their forefathers.
Did you know, according to what the Bible says, you'll never die?
He's gonna wash my tears away, then for 100 years I'll pray. I got so many million years that I can't count them.
We are the most religious nation on earth. We throw more holy water, sing in more choirs, build more churches, mosques, and synagogues, and dispatch our loved ones at the end of their lives with more prayer and holy smoke than any other nation in the history of the universe. Apparently, you can't get elected to anything in this country without God blessing this, that, and my dog and my cat. I mean, this is ridiculous. People are tripping over their robes to bless everything in public life. And, you know, God himself must be up there saying, hey, you know, wincing. Hold it, you know, don't talk to me. Talk to the person next to you on the bus.
These pilgrims were determined at all costs to cross the ocean to the New World and to found a home where they could live in their own way.
Christianity and capitalism arrived in America in the same boats. 150 years later, though, the Founding Fathers made the separation of church and state a cornerstone of the new Constitution.
Of course, the role that religion has played in America in terms of its identity led to this paradox of the United States being founded on the idea of separation of church and state, becoming one of the most religious nations in the world.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
One nation indivisible, those kids pledged in 1953. A year later, the words "under God" were added to the pledge. It was the height of the Cold War.
We ask God in prayer to change the hearts of the godless leaders of Russia.
President Eisenhower spoke of spiritual weapons. With the addition of "under God" to the pledge, Ike said, "We are reaffirming the transcendence of religious faith in America's heritage and its future." 50 years later, 9 out of 10 Americans insist that they believe in a God. But America's atheists are still battling to maintain the line drawn by the Constitution between politics and God.
One nation, indivisible! One nation, indivisible!
The American Atheists Organization claims there are 30 million non-believers in America, but they can only mobilize a couple of thousand for a march on Washington. Polls suggest that atheists are more reviled than any other group. In some states, atheists are barred from public office. Still, Ellen Johnson, president of the American Atheists, remains defiantly upbeat.
Whether you know it or not, we are your neighbors, your friends, your spouses, your lovers, and your children.
As Ellen Johnson calls the role of godless Americans, it's clear the American atheists remain a beleaguered minority. They're still manning the ramparts of unbelief in the spirit, if not the style, of Madalyn Murray O'Hair.
Give them all a big hand.
God save the United States and this honorable court.
O'Hair's Supreme Court victory in 1963, abolishing school prayer, shook godly America. It also made Madalyn notorious, a national celebrity.
When the case was decided, she was pictured on the front steps of the U.S. Supreme Court with Bill and John Garth, her sons, and she was promptly quoted in the paper that she was just beginning to go after established religions in America, that she was not going to just rest on removing prayer from the schools, that she was going to go after tax-free property for religious institutions, that she was going to go after the under God phrase in the Pledge of Allegiance. She was going to try to stop the Pope from using the National Mall when he came. She brought suit against the Space Agency when they prayed in space.
Do you know that after the moon mission that the Pope issued an announcement that it was the duty of the government soon to put missionaries on those flights? To convert other life forms.
Overnight, O'Hair became the most hated woman in America. She was thrilled.
Being described as the most hated woman in America gave her power. I mean, if you're the most anything, you must be a pretty powerful person.
She's doing everything that she can to be hated. But some would say that was her shtick. That was her identity. That's how she made her money, by being hated. Where she is somewhat unique in the movement is that she's the first to seize the name atheist and proclaim it and put it up in banners that she is not only an atheist, but at one point she was saying, "I am the atheist."
As the 60s began to rock, Madalyn's outrageous campaigns made sensational headlines. She got generous support. A 77-year-old nudist non-believer gave her land and money for an atheist center. Thousands of dollars arrived in every post. But the O'Hair family life was in uproar. Their house was stoned. Bill and his brother were beaten up. Madalyn received death threats. She just turned up the volume.
I do believe that these people are intent in ruining me completely, and that killing me is not out of their mind.
In the mid-60s, the headlong melodrama of O'Hair's life reflected the gathering rebellion across America. After a violent confrontation with Baltimore police over a domestic dispute, Madalyn fled to Hawaii and then in May 1965 to Mexico. Within months, she was expelled.
I was approached one night at gunpoint and herded onto an airplane.
Madalyn still faced 100 years in jail for assaulting Baltimore policemen, but a legal loophole canceled her charges. She set up her headquarters in Austin, Texas, relishing the rebellious atmosphere of America in the 60s.
It's as if Madalyn caught the wave. You know, the timing couldn't have been better. She began to catch the counterculture movement of the 60s, where nothing was sacred. Everything was to be examined, everything was challenged. And Madalyn ended up in the thick of that and was carried by that wave forward. She knew how to play it. She knew how to stage things. She knew what people expected, and she was going to, whenever she appeared, she was the public Madalyn.
Constantly on the move, Madalyn pursued new targets. She championed masturbation. She ridiculed the Pope. She challenged the words "under God" in the Pledge of Allegiance and "In God We Trust" on dollar bills. Grabbing big TV ratings, she became a scandalous demon on the talk shows.
Ladies and gentlemen, here is Madalyn Murray O'Hair.
We knew if we were going to succeed with this daytime television show, we better have something that will compel the viewer. And my first guest was Madalyn Murray O'Hair. You can imagine. I mean, I found Elvis. I mean, this woman drew a very large crowd, and that's what I was paid to do, although I thought her message was very, very important.
Your grief is not assuaged as would be the religionist who believes that there is another place where happiness will again be abundant.
Oh, that's a big lollipop.
I know you don't believe that. I'm
we
asking...
must look at them, and we never say they've passed over, or they're gone to their reward, or they have been transported, or anything else. People are dead.
Madalyn could be very, very unpleasant and sarcastic. Almighty God, she pronounced God, God. You go ahead and pray, and she'd laugh at people who prayed.
You're going to spend your whole life preparing to meet the Lord. Boy, you folks are crazy as hell.
And she seemed to get the biggest kick out of the Christians who called the program and wished that God would damn her in hell forever in boiling oil. That just thrilled her. That was a success. That was her proof that religion was a form of mental illness.
Hitting the road in the 1970s, Madalyn introduced a whole generation to the seditious ideas of atheism.
You didn't hear the word atheist really 30 years ago, until I saw Madalyn O'Hair on television. I don't think I ever heard the word before until I saw her on television in 1978. And it was fascinating. It was on a Sunday afternoon, and she was on a local station, and she was sitting on a platform, surrounded by all types of clergy, priests and ministers and rabbis, and they were purposely brought on to refute everything she had to say live on the air. But she was right.
As I traveled through America looking for Madalyn, I kept coming across people whose lives were changed by knowing her.
It was like a gigantic coming out party for us. When we would go and stand beside Madalyn, sometimes we still want to whisper, well, I've been an atheist for 10 years. But you still didn't even want everyone in the room to hear it.
She was a hard-driving person. They just had a cause, and I always just loved her.
She received dozens of death threats, probably daily, and always figured that someday someone would kill her.
When I met her, when I was in the atheist rock band in the Midwest, and I think it was 1977, 78, somewhere around that, and she had given a beautiful talk at Drake University, and she was at the reception afterwards, and I walked up to her with my long hair and leather jacket and everything. I just said, "Hey, you're fucking excellent." And without even skipping a beat, she just said, "I know."
30 years ago, as Madalyn Murray O'Hair paraded atheism across America, she was wading boldly into hostile territory. She did a series of knockabout performances in 38 Bible Belt towns with a firebrand Southern preacher. The Reverend Bob Harrington, the self-styled chaplain of Bourbon Street, was a showman as outrageous as Madalyn.
The people were so excited about me taking on this woman, Madalyn Murray O'Hair. They come by the thousands. The only place she ever went for fun was with me on these shows. The only time she got to laugh was with me. But I never met anybody that claimed to love her.
After 20 years of confrontations and legal fights, O'Hair retreated increasingly into the tight circle of her atheist family, her younger son John Garth and granddaughter Robin. Madalyn had adopted Robin when Robin's father, Bill Murray, broke away from the family and from atheism. One night in 1980, Bill Murray had a dream. It changed his life. He had a vision of hell and salvation. And Bill, who at 14 had fought alongside his mother to defeat school prayer, denounced atheism. He became a born-again Christian.
He has this born-again experience, and he breaks from her, and not only breaks, but he goes into this evangelical ministry, his own ministry, and becomes perhaps her most visible opponent. And we have this annual ritual of Madalyn having her national meeting of the American Atheists, and Bill showing up with his entourage and having very public confrontations between the two.
Today, Bill Murray heads up the Religious Freedom Coalition, an evangelical lobbying group in Washington. He is close to President Bush. He campaigns to put prayer back in America's schools.
What I saw in Christianity and what I saw in Jesus Christ was a solution to the ills of society. Not a cause, but a solution. And I'm sure that there are a few atheists that live exemplary lives and that are very moral people. But the majority, when God is not present in a person's life, and that spiritual void leads to all sorts of other societal ills. Do non-believers get excluded in our society? Of course they do. They are not a part of a whole society, of the majority society, and so as a result, there are instances where they aren't going to fit.
Madalyn called Bill's conversion a postnatal abortion.
I know he broke her heart. This was the biggest cross she had ever to carry. And I remember being surprised at how wounded she was by this, and it was revealing to me.
In the 1980s and 90s, the three O'Hairs ran the American Atheists as a family fiefdom. From childhood, Madalyn had aspired to the good life. Now the O'Hairs live together with the tastes and comforts of regular American families, easy listening music, and the annual Christmas tree. She was by now a familiar gargoyle in the Austin landscape, but always an outsider.
I can't tell you how many times we made frantic runs for our cars in parking lots or where we have been insulted in restaurants. The doctor tells me to walk 2 miles a day. I can't. I cannot go out and walk 2 miles any place in Austin without being accosted by a religious nut.
With the looming threat of a ruinous legal action, Madalyn's health deteriorated.
I'm 74 years old now. I'm diabetic.
and I'm in really rotten health. And I hang on to life, for there is nothing else that I can do but hang on and fight. And I'll die too. Madalyn Murray O'Hair.
At her last atheist convention, O'Hair was still trying to rouse her followers.
Atheists feel that they dare not speak, and that is wrong. Knowing what we are, knowing how it is, knowing that the worst may come, atheists must speak out.
I came to Austin, Texas to track down what finally happened to O'Hair and her family. I knew that things went badly for them in the 1990s. The U.S. taxmen hounded them. They were fighting a legal battle in California which might have bankrupted them. It seemed they were casting around for escapes, exploring prospects for a life in New Zealand. By 1995, after a series of mysterious robberies, the atheist headquarters was an uneasy place.
They always knew what they were doing, but this time they did not know at all what they were doing. They did it all wrong this time.
The final nightmarish chapter of Madalyn's atheist epic began on the morning of August 28, 1995. A letter posted on the gate of the Austin headquarters announced, "The Murray O'Hair family has been called out of town on an emergency basis. We do not know how long we will be gone." At their house, the O'Hairs left behind the remains of a meal, their passports, and their beloved dogs.
Nobody was answering the phone at the center in Texas. I thought, well, nobody's answering the phone. Call back. You know, it didn't mean anything. Call back hours later. No, there wasn't any answer. Okay, well, send a fax. Please call. Nobody can get in touch with you. Call their cell phone. Did all those things, then we realized that no, they weren't answering. Finally, I called John's cell phone, and Madalyn answered. And I thought, oh, I said, wow, finally. She said, everything's okay. I think that was it.
But in the days that followed, there was no sign of the three O'Hairs. Days became weeks, and still no news. But Ellen Johnson had some troubling phone calls.
I just remember one particular phone call, I think Robin answered the phone. And Robin was just not herself. I mean, Robin was really, really upset. And I said, what's wrong? Is everything okay? And she said, well, could I tell you if it wasn't?
After a month, the phone calls stopped.
For the longest time, I believed that they had taken the money and run. And I can't sugarcoat that. That's what I believed.
Outside the inner circles of the American atheists, most people forgot about the O'Hairs, figuring they'd fled the country. John McCormick is a reporter with the San Antonio Express-News. He could have had no idea that the O'Hairs' disappearance was about to become the biggest story of his life.
At the time the one-year anniversary of her disappearance approached, I was unaware that she was even missing. It began as a pretty ordinary assignment, a one-story assignment, and of course it grew from there.
It was 3 months after McCormick's routine piece that the story moved on. The American Atheists Organization filed annual tax returns showing that more than $600,000 was missing. McCormick teamed up with a private detective to follow the money, and, they thought, the runaway O'Hairs.
That was our theory, that they had taken the money and run, and we followed leads. New Zealand was an obvious lead because they had contemplated retiring there. Australia, Hawaii, we had people saying they'd been seen in India, Germany, Canada.
In fact, the breakthrough came much closer to home. It was in San Antonio, Texas, just an hour up the road from the atheist headquarters in Austin. The investigation of the O'Hairs' disappearance was soon focused amid the dreary expressways and motels and storage facilities which circled the city. Key were the cell phone records of John Garth Murray in the weeks following the disappearance.
They laid out a map of the places they had called, the services they'd used. There were calls to airlines, there were calls to financial institutions, there were calls to jewelry shops. So there were also calls to local restaurants and things like that. So we could pretty much put them in the northwest quadrant of San Antonio. You know, that led us to the next big breakthrough, which was the discovery that they'd bought $500,000 worth of gold coins. Money always adds a lot to the plot line, so now you had 3 people gone and $600,000, so the story became quite a bit more interesting.
In September 1995, Corey Tickner took a surprising phone call. It was 2 weeks after the O'Hairs' disappearance.
A gentleman by the name of Mr. Murray called me and was interested in purchasing a large amount of gold coins. He indicated that he wanted to buy approximately $600,000 worth of gold coins, which was a little bit out of the ordinary.
Tickner ordered the 1,500 gold coins, and on September 29, 1995, 4 weeks after the disappearance, he contacted John Garth Murray to tell him that most of the coins had arrived.
He wasn't familiar with how to count coins. He was trying to count each one individually and look at them, and it was kind of a time-consuming affair because he was looking at each coin, so it took a couple hours to do. He was kind of unkept. He kind of had a bit of an odor to him, kind of like he hadn't showered recently, and he was kind of disheveled, I guess, kind of uncombed. Then we put the gold coins in a briefcase and we escorted him out to his car, put him in the trunk of his car, and he drove off.
My name is Ed Martin. I was with the Criminal Investigation Division of the Internal Revenue Service. We're the ones that carry the badge and the gun. Okay, we make arrests and such. I began by trying to follow the money.
Ed Martin, like John McCormack, found that the investigation of the O'Hairs' disappearance became an obsession. It consumed him for 4 years. He told me how Madalyn's unpopularity in Austin made local lawmen and Texas Governor George Bush reluctant to pursue the case of the missing atheists.
She was not well liked here because of the things that she brought up, you know, protesting this, and she didn't like the, I think, the cross in the city of Austin seal, and I think she protested the nativity scene at the Capitol, and I mean all of these things, and so she didn't make herself real friendly.
By 1998, 3 years after the disappearance, the mystery was beginning to unravel. The investigations of a reporter, a private detective, the FBI, and Ed Martin were revealing a grisly story. The main suspect was Madalyn's former office manager, David Waters. Madalyn had hired Waters to help as a typesetter on the Atheist magazine and then promoted him to office manager.
David Waters was a very good typesetter. He was extremely efficient. I do have to say that there was something about him that didn't seem right to me.
Before they disappeared, the O'Hairs were already alarmed about Waters. He had been found guilty of stealing $54,000 from the Atheists' headquarters, but was freed on 10 years probation. More disturbing was what Madalyn heard about the past history of her former office manager.
A member dug up some archival newspaper accounts of Waters' arrest at the age of 17 for murder. He and some others had beaten another guy to death with a fence post, ostensibly because they wanted to use his car and he didn't want them to. And Madalyn was scared by that.
This is David Waters firing his 9mm Browning automatic in a range here in Austin. David is a convicted felon. He's not supposed to be in possession of ammunition, much less a handgun or any gun. This is David showing his prowess with his weapon.
Madalyn published a blistering attack about Waters, which detailed a depraved attack he'd made on his mother. Waters was enraged.
She went over the line with him when she hung his dirty laundry in the public about his criminal past and his horrific behavior toward his mother, and it ended up one of these personalities was going to die, and it was Madalyn Murray O'Hair.
Waters was an obvious suspect, but with no trace of the O'Hairs or their money, he lived on in Austin, denying everything.
He was a very bold individual. He was intelligent, and he wasn't in the least bit intimidated by having to talk to a reporter who obviously believed he was, a murderer.
His demeanor was kind of above everything. His eyes were really cold. I could see that he was a different person. Different.
It was a phone call in June 1998, almost 3 years after the disappearance, that began to unlock the mystery. John McCormick got a call from a man about his missing brother.
He said his brother, Danny Fry, had gone to San Antonio in the summer of '95 at the behest of a person named David Waters. And that name, of course, rang a loud bell in my mind because he was the former office manager of the O'Hairs in Austin and a convicted murderer and an all-around bad guy. So for the first time since they disappeared, a coherent picture started to come together because you have some, very dangerous people, you have a lot of money, and you have people disappearing.
That phone call opened the door to a gothic murder story. McCormick's investigations identified a headless, handless body as the missing Danny Fry, who was a small-time con man who'd vanished at the same time as Madalyn and her family. David Waters was still denying everything. Before he published his story naming Waters as the prime suspect, McCormick moved his family out of his house.
I also asked my neighbor if he would be available to come shoot someone if I had a crisis, and he said he was available, this being Texas. So he said basically just tell me which one to shoot.
The trail of investigations led to a drab motel called the Warren Inn outside San Antonio, not far from Corey Tickner's gold and jewelry store. Over the month following the O'Hair's sudden disappearance, the final act of America's most hated woman was played out here. Kidnapped and held hostage at the Warren Inn for 4 weeks, the three O'Hairs were made to play out a surreal drama. Their jailers were Waters, his violent prison buddy Gary Carr, and Danny Fry.
The O'Hairs didn't do anything. They just kind of went along with the program. Madalyn had her medicine, and they would eat food, and they went to Blockbuster and rented games and videos, and, the standard thing that an American would do, but at the same time, they were captives. So it's kind of odd. Danny Fry and Waters and Gary Carr all carried weapons, so they were always armed around the O'Hairs. And they survived there for 30 days. Well, at the end of the time, which was about September the 27th, other plans start to take shape.
With the gold coins delivered by John Murray, the family were moved from the Warren Inn to a nearby motel, one with more private vehicle access.
They took possession of the gold, and then later on that afternoon, they killed John. They strangled him. When we did find the body, he had a plastic bag over his head. After they killed him, they went into the other bedroom and then they strangled Madalyn and Robin. And that evening, they just took the bodies and put them into the van, transferred them out of the hotel, which was on the ground floor, into this van, and then drove them back to Austin.
David Waters wanted to, stand over Madalyn Murray O'Hair's dead body and say, "I'm standing, you're dead," because she jerked him around, she humiliated him in public, and he wasn't used to this, and he knew how to solve problems. He killed people,
Austin is ringed by anonymous storage units. After parking the bodies of the three O'Hairs in their van, Waters and his colleagues stowed the gold here in Unit 1640. For 3 years, investigators working on the O'Hair case were puzzled about the gold. Waters was the chief suspect, but he lived like a man with no money at all.
I was able to watch him in the mornings with his cup of coffee before he'd go to work and wonder about, here's a man that is very, very thin and driving an old car, yet he's got possession of $500,000. So I always wondered what had happened. How could he not be spending that money?
The answer to that question about the gold stored in Unit 1640 was to be one of the most improbable episodes of the story. Just across the road, I found the Poodle Dog Lounge, where Waters' girlfriend, Patty Jo Steffens, worked. I had a drink in the sleazy Poodle Dog with Ed Martin. I kept thinking about Patty Jo and her murderous boyfriend, David Waters, who beat her up and used her. And I discovered how this tough, intelligent girl finally destroyed him. It was John McCormick's story identifying Waters' murdered henchman, Danny Fry, which finally sent Patty Jo to the FBI.
Well, the first time that Mr. Waters' girlfriend arrived at our office, it was very intense. Here's a woman who is scared to death. She's fearful that her ex-boyfriend is going to kill her. And so she was someone that we had to go slowly with. She did provide us with the information that we needed, and because of her and others, we were able to solve this case.
Patty Jo's story led the FBI to a gruesome sequence of events following the murder of the O'Hairs. The bodies were butchered by Gary Carr in another storage unit and stuffed into 55-gallon drums. Then the murderers went for breakfast. They hosed down the storage place with chemicals. Patty Jo reported that Waters returned to his apartment smelling of bleach. The next day, Waters and Carr murdered Danny Fry. They chopped off his head and his hands. The identification 3 years later of Danny Fry and Patty Jo's story were the end of the road for David Waters.
The thing exploded. They raided Waters' apartment in Austin. They raided Gary Carr's in Chicago. And then once these guys were all locked up, we all could relax a little more.
Mr. Waters.
The legal processes wound on for almost 2 years. With no bodies and no money, the cases against Waters and Carr were difficult to build. But violations of probation and firearms were enough to lock away both men for life.
Confinement for 60 years.
The damning testimony of Patty Jo Steffens finally slammed the cell doors.
Pull her toes off with pliers, or...
Do you have any comment, David?
What's up, sir?
You'll have no fury like a woman scorned.
The murderers of Madalyn Murray O'Hair were behind bars, but there were still no bodies. It was to be more than 5 years after the murders before that mystery was resolved. There was an answer at last to the disappearance of $500,000 in gold coins.
They put a $5 lock on a storage unit that retained $500,000 in gold. When David Waters went to pick up the gold, it was not there. The gold was gone. What happened to the gold was, stranger than fiction, I guess, 3 young men from San Antonio that were burglarizing storage units came to Austin. They were happy. They didn't know how much they had, but they were real happy. And they divided all of that gold up. Just sat around with little Tupperware bowls, they said, just put gold coins in it.
They hit the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, and then they went and blew it on cars and strippers and women and apartments and trips.
Of the $500,000 which cost the O'Hairs their lives, only a single coin was ever found. I had one final chapter of Madalyn's story to explore. It was the puzzle of what had happened to the remains of the 3 O'Hairs, still missing even after her murderers were locked up. But first I wanted to catch up with the inheritors of Madalyn's atheist legacy. After Madalyn was murdered, Ellen Johnson became president of the American Atheists. She moved the headquarters to suburban New Jersey. Today, she's fighting to rebuild the movement as a political lobbying group.
It was basically learning my job, and I've been learning that for the past 10 years. And what I've been learning about mostly is the atheists, how to organize the atheists. Why is it that with so many issues, and atheists being so passionate about this, why aren't they as strong and as formidable in America as the theists? There are 45 million evangelical Christians in America, but there are 30 million Americans who are non-religious. We have the numbers, so my job is to figure out what to do with those numbers.
Traveling through America, I met some of those atheists.
Judy has made some marvelous cookies.
They're thoughtful, decent people. No hint of the appetite for outrage of Madalyn Murray O'Hair. No hint either of the evil many Americans fear. In Montana, I came across a Jewish atheist. There was a Mormon atheist in Utah. An ex-military atheist lived in South Dakota. A freethinkers group met in Kansas City. And bright kids gathered at an atheist summer camp in Ohio. All of them were getting on with their lives in godly America.
Thank you all for coming.
4 decades after O'Hair's victory at the Supreme Court, American atheists rallied to challenge the Pledge of Allegiance at the same spot. They still struggle to be heard over Christians protesting the infidel.
Jesus, precious Jesus, we have the victory. Everybody got it. Come on.
Our nation is under attack from religious fanatics from without and from religious fanatics from within.
Hallelujah! Lift up your hands, because we have a voice of triumph.
Free-thinking, non-theistic, humanistic people. That's you, that's me, that's us. We belong here. We have a right to be here. We are Americans.
Always talking about God, right? But just last week, you instigated a drive-by. Explain that, Miss Super Christian. Look at you plugging up the ears. You don't even want to listen. Always go to church, but you mean as hell. Loose screws in the head. If you brag about being in jail, loose screws in the head.
As the atheists gathered for their annual convention in San Diego, they recruited a new voice in their struggle to connect with America. Atheist rapper Charlie Boy played to some slightly bewildered delegates.
It's the birth of a new thing. Can you hack it? It's the OG faggots. Ain't your gangster booty buster.
But most of the convention speakers had a more familiar message.
We have, in effect, a marriage of business and religion. The clergy are parasites who drain the energy from society's workers. And yet, the clergy control probably the largest sector of the American economy.
We are the atheists, free from mind control.
40 years after Madalyn Murray O'Hair's battle over school prayer, godless Americans are convinced they can win new battles.
We love nature and humanity.
Push the atheist too far, and you're going to have an atheist movement. The atheists are going to fight back, and you might not want that. So be careful what you wish for, Christians.
I wanted to see the place where Madalyn's story ended. The Texas outback is wild territory, miles from anywhere. It was a year after Waters' conviction before investigators succeeded in getting the truth from him about where he'd buried the O'Hairs. In the end, Waters traded a possible death penalty for revealing the location of the bodies in an anonymous area of scrubland on a remote ranch. Don Friend, the rancher, showed me the spot where the murdered O'Hairs had been buried 10 years earlier.
These markers, actually I put those here not
to memorialize the woman, but simply, or her family, but simply to mark the spot where they dug.
Don Friend was there when David Waters in shackles was brought to identify the grave.
He stood about where we are here, and he looked around, and he turned from one side to the other, and he said, I believe they're buried right here. And the first bone that they discovered was a femur about that long that had been sawed. And then, as I remember, the next bones they found were the tips of her fingers. They got out paintbrushes and they would gently move the dirt around. We're very careful with each part of the body. That somehow really impressed me, and it was done by believers.
As the forensic team exhumed the remains, they uncovered a steel hip joint. It finally confirmed the identification of Madalyn Murray O'Hair.
And it was like a diamond sitting there in the dirt, and it's like, now I know for sure that that's Madalyn Murray O'Hair's body.
2 years to the day after he saved himself from the death penalty by revealing the burial site, David Waters died in prison of cancer.
That's the way they chose to have it.
I went with Ed Martin to see the place where Madalyn's remains ended up, an unmarked grave in a suburban Austin cemetery.
The casket was in it's a large vault. There's no casket, it's a large vault. It's put in the ground, and then the bodies were paper bags, and they were put inside, with Madalyn being put at the head. He was concerned.
There was a final tussle between the American atheists and Bill Murray over the remains. In the end, Bill respected his mother's wishes that no prayers be said. Over my journey, I got to like Madalyn Murray O'Hair. She was outrageous, funny, and fearless, and her own kind of moral muckraker. And she stood up to irrational forces. But I think that Phil Donahue, a lifelong practicing Catholic, put it best.
Madalyn's message and power and the energy of her personality would be very useful, I believe, in America today. Free speech means robust dialogue. And at a time when we need it most, dissenters are hardly heard at all. That's a shame.
You don't like that?
The Christian God is coming to town. He's making a list and checking it well. He's gonna find out who's going to hell. The Christian God is coming to town. He sees you when you're sinning. He knows when you've been bad. If you don't watch out, he'll send you to hell. Now wouldn't that be sad? When you're shamed enough, they pass the plate. The more you give, the better you rate. The Christian God is coming to town. Everybody in the world can go to hell.